Good afternoon. My name is Wutich, and I'm the director of the Center for Global Health and a President's Professor of Anthropology at Arizona State University. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of the Household Water Insecurity, or HWISE Network. Thank you so much for coming out today to learn more about the work of HWISE and the new water insecurity scale that we're launching. On behalf of Arizona State University International Development, we welcome you to ASU's new building in Washington, D.C. ASU is one of the fastest growing research universities, and we focus the efforts of our over 3,500 faculty and 85,000 students on providing solutions to global and local challenges. We value thinking big and collaborating with diverse implementing policy, private sector, and funding partners. And that's why this is a great place for our launch. ASU International Development is represented here by its Executive Director, Ann Simmons-Benton, and Dr. Roseanne Schuster, the Director of Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning at ASU's Global Impact Collaboratory. We thank ASU for generously providing the space and refreshments today. Now I'd like to introduce the HWISE Network. Many of our members are here, and I'd like to specifically point out our Executive Committee members, if you haven't met them yet. Professor Justin Stoller from University of Miami, Professor Sera from Northwestern University, and Professor Wendy Jepson from Texas A&M University. Professor Jepson is our HWISE Network leader. I hope you've enjoyed your conversation so far tonight. Now we'll move to our 20-minute short program. I'll begin with a brief overview of the HWISE Network, followed by a presentation from Professor Young from Northwestern on the HWISE scale itself. Then Paule Roudil from UNESCO will speak. And then finally, we'll hear from John Clifton, Global Managing Partner of Gallup, on efforts to incorporate the HWISE scale into the Gallup World Poll. We'll follow this with a brief Q&A and then invite you to continue the conversation tonight on how the HWISE scale can be incorporated into your program and policy endeavors. With this group, I'm sure there is no need to stress how important water is for economic development, environmental sustainability, and human health. Many of us have dedicated our lives to this problem. And it's no secret that the measures commonly used to assess water adequacy at the household level are, in a word, inadequate. Measures like access to an improved water source, distance to the water source, or even in-home water connections have some important advantages like simplicity and cross-cultural validity. But many of us have found that they don't really capture household-level experiences of water insecurity. Things like whether people's daily routines were interrupted, whether or not they were scrambling to find water, and when people felt fear and desperation about water running out. With this in mind, many of us have been toiling away in different corners of the world trying to solve this measurement problem. 15 years ago, as an anthropologist in Bolivia, I created what we believe was the first ethnographically grounded household water insecurity scale with funding from NSF's Cultural Anthropology program. Following that, colleagues created unique, site-specific water insecurity scales all around the world, including Sera Young's work in Kenya and Jed Stevenson's work in Ethiopia. Another major milestone was when Wendy Jepson created the first water insecurity scale for household use in a developed, advanced economy context, which she deployed in the colonias of Texas. An important insight from this work was that water insecurity is not merely, as many people think, a developing world phenomenon. It occurs wherever there is inequity in access to water infrastructure. I see some of you agree. In 2016, a small group of us came together at Texas A&M, thanks to the support of their College of Geosciences, to see if we could make rapid progress on integrating what we had learned separately around our singular tools in each of our field sites, and create a tool that could be used globally. The papers resulting from this endeavor are on the flash drives that you received this afternoon, and they form the foundation of the work that we'll be discussing and celebrating tonight. After that promising start, our efforts exploded into a much wider endeavor. Under Professor Jepson's leadership, in 2018, we founded the HWISE Network with support from NSF's Geography and Spatial Sciences program. The core mission of the HWISE Network is much broader than the scale that we present today. It is to innovate the wider study of household water insecurity and to disseminate new tools in support of global water programs, policy, and research. We are now hard at work at an array of initiatives around water insecurity, including geospatial analysis, water sharing, tracking health outcomes, and other important but understudied dimensions of global household water insecurity. We are delighted that many of those scholars around the world who helped develop the science of household water insecurity at its earliest stages are now members of our network. Some of them are here tonight and are helping to advance these diverse initiatives. Today, though, we are here to launch our very first task that we set ourselves as a group, a completed tool, the Household Water Insecurity Experiences Scale. This particular effort was funded by the Amana program under UK Aid, with 3 key institutions collaborating: Northwestern, Texas A&M, and Arizona State. I am proud to introduce my collaborator, Professor Sera of Northwestern, who has led that Amana-funded effort, to talk more about the first cross-cultural scale and why it's an important development. But this is also the start of much more, and we encourage you to stay, enjoy, and talk to the many HWISE networks here today about our next steps and how the HWISE scale can help you achieve your programmatic and policy goals in the many sectors where water insecurity is so important. Sera.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that I'm standing here in between you and interesting conversations and drinks and food and water. So I'm going to limit myself to answering just 4 questions. The first of which is, why is measuring experiences with water important? But before I talk about the scale, I want to just step back for a second and think about how special water is. I mean, water is what makes planet Earth unique from any other place in the universe. And our lives depend on water. I mean, sitting here tonight, 60 to 70% of what's inside of us is water. So there are so many things that we do with water, and drinking is a really obvious one. Agriculture is also quite present. Water is quite present in agriculture. But so is water in cooking and cleaning those dishes that we cook with, and cleaning those children who we feed, and cleaning ourselves. Beyond the visceral, water is an important part of spiritual life and societal connections. At least 4 billion people face water scarcity for 1 month per year, and many more have problems with excess or flooding or poor water quality, such that experiences with water are undoubtedly impacted by these problems. So that's why measuring experiences is important. And I'll move now to what the gaps are in prior measurements. Another way to put it is, why do we need another measurement of water? So there are lots of existing measurements of water. We know how to measure water in the physical environment. We have lots of hydrologic indicators. At the state, we know how many cubic meters per capita of water are available. We can say that there's E. coli in water, or there's lead or other heavy metals in parts per billion in the water that we drink. But what's missing is something at the household or the individual level, something that's analogous to, for example, the HWISE. And we have these great experiential measures of food insecurity. And if it's the USDA Food Security Module, if it's USAID's HWISE, if it's what FAO has created most recently, the Food Insecurity Experiences Scale, those have provided actionable data for both interventions and policy change. And I argued tonight that we need a sister scale, something to measure the experiences of water analogous to these other scales. So, question 3, is the HWISE scale a robust measure? The short answer is yes. In earlier iterations of this talk, 20 slides of tables and figures followed, where I explained the blood and sweat and tears and statistics that went into making this scale. I will spare you those, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And point you to the jump drive, where riveting articles such as best practices for developing and validating scales, a primer on that, or even the protocol that we use to develop this scale can be found. There's lots on that jump drive. On Friday, if you're not busy at 10 a.m., I'll be talking about this at the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences. Please come. And I'm going to limit my, yes, this is a robust scale to the next 3 slides. So we assimilated items from tremendously excellent site-specific scales, like the one Amber developed for Bolivia, like the one Wendy developed for the Texas-Mexico border, and drew on our own ethnographic experiences and came up with 32 items of experiences of problems with water. And then we implemented those 32 items along with a bunch of other questions in 28 sites in something like 24 countries, 8,127 households. And we picked those sites to really stress test these questions. So we wanted heterogeneity in region of the world, in problems with water, so we had places where flooding was predominant, we had places where scarcity was predominant. And we pushed hard. Now I can tell you, and you're probably thinking, nobody wants 32 items on a scale. I don't, personally. And so we worked hard to reduce those number of items using both theory and statistics, both RASH modeling as well as classical test theory. And we got down to 12 items. The items take the format: how often in the last month have you or anyone in your household worried that you wouldn't have enough water for all your needs? Or how often has the main water source been interrupted or limited? How often has there not been enough water to wash clothes? I won't read all of them. There are 12, as I say, in total. They're here and they're also on your jump drive. So this is what we asked, and then we evaluated if what we did, those 12 items were the right items. And I can tell you they're valid. We looked at all kinds of validity, internal and external, predictive, convergent, discriminant. We also sought to be sure that a 7 in Pakistan meant a 7 in Nepal and a 7 in Kenya. And I can tell you, in all kinds of ways, they're equivalent. A 7 means the same in all of those sites. So the good news is that this scale is ready for broad implementation, and the timing couldn't be better. So in 2018, a high-level panel at the UN declared that this was the Water Action Decade. And the first item of that sort of decade, so what should we do now that this is the Water Action Decade, is that we need higher resolution data on water than what we currently had. That worked out well. I didn't know that was going to happen. And so my last question to answer for you is, what is all of these efforts? What are all these efforts going to tell us? The first thing that the HWISE scale can tell us is what the prevalence of household water insecurity is, and who are the vulnerable populations. I mean, water is surely a heterogeneous resource. So I'm so delighted to be standing here tonight with a representative from Gallup and a representative from UNESCO, who we are working together to implement this scale in the 2020 round of the Gallup World Polls. It's no small endeavor, and it's not free, so we're working hard for the next few months to raise the money to make this happen, but I'm confident that it's a worthwhile endeavor. We'll also be able to determine the consequences of household water insecurity. So we posit there are at least 4 pathways by which household water insecurity is really harmful: economic, nutrition, disease, and psychosocial pathways. And interestingly enough, this area is wide open because we haven't been able to quantify household water insecurity in an equivalent way across sites. Anyone can, this is so wide open, I'm obviously overwhelmed with the excitement of it. The last thing that this can do, that the HWISE scale can do, is to help us to monitor and evaluate interventions that are ongoing. We can also probably determine their cost effectiveness. I'm happy to report that there are a number of NGOs who are already implementing the HWISE scale to tell us what happens when infrastructure changes, what happens when a well is dug, what happens when the price of water is altered. So, kind of by way of conclusion, I would argue that these data are a clear pathway to re-envisioning measurements of water. I mean, Gallup has set a precedent by after collecting several rounds of data on food insecurity, the food insecurity has become an indicator in the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would argue that by measuring household water insecurity, we can better understand how we care for our children, how we feed our families, and how we interact across individuals and societies. So I want to thank a large consortium who has played very nicely together. We've done wonderful things with a lot of love, and we've also received really important funding from these donors and others. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Paule Roudil from UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you, Sera. Arriving from New York, where I am the UNESCO representative to the United Nations, I have to say that addressing the question of the sixth goal about water, clean water, the way that you are addressing it is really very refreshing. I am coming from exactly the opposite process. That means you are coming from an analysis from the bottom to the top. In New York, we have the Agenda 2030 with the deadline of 2030 to implement it and to allow each citizen in the world to have access to clean water by 2030. We are not yet there, and we have a group of friends, member states of a group of friends, members of this group, mobilizing, making advocacy for water, but not really addressing the real way to solve the issue. And tonight, I have to say that coming from this vision from the top to the bottom and listening to you from the bottom to the top, I think that your analysis is really a very concrete reply to what we are listening to in New York. So congratulations, and thank you very much to invite UNESCO. I know that my colleague, who unfortunately couldn't be with you tonight, and is traveling in Russia this day, would have been very pleased to be with you because he's very positive and excited with this consortium you are setting together with our friend from Gallup. And I would like really to congratulate you for this innovative and needful work that you are conducting. You know that UNESCO is the scientific arm of the United Nations family, and we have the mandate to ensure that the challenges and questions decision makers will have to face in the future become part of the research agenda of today. Maybe you know that the S of UNESCO has been added to the name of UNESCO in 1945 when we have been created in London by the scientific community in London, the UK, the British scientific community fight it at this time to add science and the mandate of UNESCO. Build the peace in the mind of men and women through education, culture and science. And so that's why since 1945, in particular under the pressure of the British community, we are the scientific arm of the United Nations, and I'm very pleased to see that the UK is already supporting this project. So in this framework, it's not surprised that our intergovernmental hydrological program has identified water security as the theme of its 8th phase. Also, the importance of water has been acknowledged in all of the post-agenda 2015 agendas, having the 6 Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda dedicated to it, and having an extensive reference in the Sendai framework and the new urban agenda. None of them propose a spherical view of addressing the challenges that the concept of water security does. Bringing together the concept of sustainable development, enhancement of resilience from water-related disasters, while thinking of the environmental flows, water security is indispensable for eradicating poverty, you mentioned it, while preserving our planet for future generations. You can understand our excitement for the work presented here tonight. We strongly believe that water security will be on the top of the post-2030 development agenda, and it is because of this belief that I am here today, and why UNESCO will be working with the group to pursue further a global picture on water insecurity at household level. We believe that this work will provide answers for the question of tomorrow and the most valuable natural resource, water. I have to say that you could count on me to progress your project and your initiative amongst a group of friends in New York when they are discussing in a diplomatic manner of water security. And you are saying maybe insecurity, but I would be positive and hope that we could speak about water security. You could count, in addition to the support of my colleague and the headquarters and the UNESCO as one, to the support of the representation in New York to promote your work. Thank you very much, and good luck. You could count on us.
Hi everyone, and happy Wednesday evening. My name is John Clifton. I'm the Global Managing Partner of Gallup, and as you saw Sera's slides on here, I'm just making a few remarks about the Gallup World Poll. And many of you might wonder, what is the Gallup World Poll? Gallup was founded by a guy by the name of George Gallup, and George Gallup became famous for his election polling and presidential approval. But interestingly enough, in a very famous interview that he did about 70 years ago with Edward Murrow, and by the way, I think Edward Murrow took a drag of a cigarette actually during that live interview, but he said to him, what is it that interests you most? And the thing he said back to him was, he said, how people's lives are going. So 15 years ago, we made a decision that we're going to take his mission and put booster rockets on it. And so we went to 150 countries to quantify how people's lives are going. Now that meant if we were going to do that properly, we had to develop a very rigorous methodology in order to do so. So in those 150 countries, we decided that 100 of them we would do face-to-face interviewing. We would actually do truly nationally representative samples, meaning some of us consume data, and we are probably the very small percentage that looks at the methodology and we say, wait a minute, that's only a city where you did those interviews. How do you project that for the whole country? Not true of the Gallup World Poll. We do truly nationally representative samples, meaning people have to walk all over those countries in order to capture how people's lives are going. So we did this, and the work culminated in what's now known as the UN World Happiness Report. Many of you are probably very familiar with this work, and again in the fine print you can see that this is powered by the Gallup World Poll. But there's a problem, because about 10 years ago, a woman from the World Bank named Dr. Leora Clapper came to me and she said, nice work on your World Poll. I said, thank you. And she said, very robust methodology, but you missed something. I said, what is it that we missed? And she said, you missed financial inclusion. She said, you don't quantify what % of people have bank accounts around the planet, and I can help. And so, I don't know if many of you are familiar with Dr. Leora Clapper. She is now, because of this work, among the top 100 most cited female economists in the world. But she went and got a large grant from the Gates Foundation. It's public how much she got. And then she added questions onto the Gallup World Poll to quantify financial inclusion. And now her work has become an official sustainable development goal at the UN, and the Secretary General reports on that. But it got a little bit more interesting, because after we did that work, someone from FAO said, by the way, you forgot something. And I was kind of getting frustrated at that point. And I said, well, what is it we forgot? And he said, quantifying hunger. So Carlo Caffiero and his team said, here is the FIES, which of course we saw up here. And we think that this also should be added on to the Gallup World Poll. So a few governments got together, gave funding to FAO, and we partnered with them, and now that too has become an official sustainable development goal that we quantify. But it got worse, because then somebody else, Andrew Forrest, who, by the way, started the Walk Free Foundation, devoted entirely to slavery, said, we are looking to partner with ILO because we want to quantify slavery. And by the way, if you've seen that statistic, now 40 million people are engaged in modern slavery around the world. That was a project that we did with them. By the way, it was even cited by the Pope, and it too has become an official sustainable development goal. I give you the background because that exact same process is happening right now tonight. Because we were approached by Sera herself, and she said, guess what else you forgot? And what else we forgot is, of course, water. And we're going to try to solve that problem this year, and we need your help. So as we're in this process of fundraising, we think we have exactly the right items. We know exactly how to translate them into 140 languages around the world in order to get these questions administered to people that represent this entire planet that we can start in January. We need your help in this process. So thank you for having us. Thank you for listening. And we hope that we can have something for you about a year and a half from now to start reporting on. Thanks for having me.